the Italian-American Publicity Management Agency, because somebody had to tell these guys to calm the hell down. Are you a high-ranking organized crime figure experiencing dangerous levels of public visibility? Have you recently appeared on national television? Started a political organization? Held a rally with 50,000 people? Publicly argued with the FBI? Accidentally exposed your own mob donors to a federal grand jury? Well, friend, you may be suffering from advanced mafia publicity syndrome. Symptoms include custom-tailored suits, microphone addiction, newspaper interviews, unexplained urges to become man of the year, and other mob bosses quietly whispering, "Who the hell does this guy think he is?" But don't worry. At the Italian-American Publicity Management Agency, we specialize in helping wise guys stay hidden like God intended. Our trained consultants offer revolutionary services including low-profile training, learn how to avoid television cameras, stop giving interviews, and resist the uncontrollable urge to become a celebrity mob boss. Because historically speaking, that never ends well. The Carlo Gambino Silence Package includes fiets, one gray suit, 2 emotionally detached nods, 3 decades of avoiding reporters, and a complimentary lesson titled, "Shut Up Before Everybody Gets Indicted." The Joe Gallo Celebrity Recovery Program. Has your capo started hanging around actors, comedians, painters, nightclub owners, and people who say things like "darling" unironically? Our specialists can help return your loved one to a traditional Brooklyn social club before he starts discussing French literature with Jerry Orbach again. The Commission Damage Control Hotline, TITI to TM, press 1 your acting boss started a civil war. Press 2 if somebody got shot at a public rally. Press 3 if your underboss disappeared on the way to a meeting. Press 4 if your family is currently on his 5th federal indictment this month. Press 5 if you are Greg Scarpa and somehow simultaneously working for everybody. At the Italian-American Publicity Management Agency, TM, we believe organized crime should remain organized. Not televised, not podcasted, not turned into a Broadway networking event with bodyguards. Because every time a mobster starts enjoying attention, somebody eventually ends up getting shot near a Cadillac. The Italian-American Publicity Management Agency is not responsible for indictments, racketeering conspiracies, commission hearings, wiretaps, missing underbosses, lions in basements, witness tampering, prison administrations, civil wars, celebrity friendships, televised disasters, or becoming vegetabled at public events. Side effects of excessive publicity may include federal surveillance, internal betrayal, sudden disappearances, and John Gotti thinking you're being too flashy. Pizzaverse Studios, keeping history loud enough to hear and dangerous enough to regret. Disclaimer. The following documentary is intended for historical, educational, organized crime analytical, and spiritually exhausting purposes only. No actual mafia commissions approved this production. No union docks were shut down during filming. No wise guys were taxed an additional $25 a month for emotional damages. This documentary contains mob bosses, civil rights rallies, assassination plots, prison wars, relentless, betrayal, corruption, federal indictments, public grandstanding, lions in basements, and enough internal family drama to make Thanksgiving at your aunt's house look emotionally stable. Any resemblance between organized crime and corporate management structures is purely coincidental. Probably. Pizzaverse Studios does not endorse racketeering, extortion, witness tampering, or becoming so addicted to publicity that even other mobsters start saying, "Shubha, tone it down already." Now let's get into it.
Pizzaverse Studios, a Palermo Productions original. The Colombo family. Civil rights, civil war, and the mob that couldn't stop shooting itself. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent DiPrio. There are mafia families. And then there are the Colombos. The Colombos weren't just violent. They were chaotic. This is the family that turned internal warfare into an art form. The family where bosses got shot at rallies. Capos got bombed in their cars. Underbosses disappeared forever. Informants played both sides for decades. And acting bosses kept getting arrested faster than the FBI could update the paperwork. Most mob families tried to stay invisible. The Colombos practically turned organized crime into live theater. And somehow, despite all the blood, all the betrayals, all the insanity, the family survived. Barely. This is the story of the Colombo family. From Joe Profaci and the Gallo Revolt, to Joe Colombo and the Italian-American Civil Rights League, to the bloody Colombo War that nearly destroyed the family from within. This isn't just a mob story. It's a story about ego, power, publicity. And what happens when gangsters stop fearing attention? The Italian-American Civil Rights League. On June 28, 1971, tens of thousands of people converged on Manhattan's Columbus Circle for the second annual Italian-American Civil Rights League rally. Police barricades rerouted traffic away from the event. On an outdoor stage festooned with red, white, and blue-fringed streamers, prominent politicians and local celebrities gathered to lend their support. Red, white, and green flags of Italy were unfurled beside the stars and stripes. Television cameramen and newspaper photographers shouldered their way through the crowd to get as close to the podium as possible. Proud Italian Americans from all over the New York metropolitan area gathered to voice their opposition to what they considered government prejudice against their people. They had a particular beef with the FBI. They felt that all Italian Americans were being tarred with the mafia brush. Just because a few Italians had established La Cosa Nostra, they certainly weren't all criminals. But the FBI, they claimed, treated them that way. The crowd cheered when they spotted Joseph Colombo, the founder of the Italian-American Civil Rights League, emerging from his car and making his way through the throng on foot. Oddly enough, Joe Colombo was the reigning boss of the New York crime family that bore his name. For some inexplicable reason, the League's supporters didn't see the irony. Colombo had started the League the year before to retaliate against what he considered unfair harassment from the FBI. On April 30th, 1970, Colombo's son, Joseph Jr., had been arrested for melting down quarters, dimes, and nickels for their silver content, hoping to earn more than the face value of the coins. As mob expert Jerry Capesi points out, the arrest was a pressure tactic aimed at the young man's father. But Joe Colombo cried foul and impetuously struck back by sending a gang of his men to picket the FBI headquarters in Manhattan. But picketing alone wasn't enough for Colombo. He soon declared that he was forming the Italian-American Civil Rights League to address the issue of discrimination against his people. To the amazement of law enforcement officials, thousands of law-abiding Italian Americans took up the cry, sending in their $10 membership fees to the organization in droves. Fearing reprisals from Italian-American voters, local politicians voiced their support. Within a matter of weeks, the League became a force of nature. 50,000 people attended the first rally at Columbus Circle on June 29, 1970. The mob ordered the docks closed for the day so that union members could attend. Stores in Italian neighborhoods around the city also closed in honor of the occasion. The huge outpouring of popular support for the League had its effect. United States Attorney General John Mitchell and New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller declared that the term mafia would no longer be used within their jurisdictions. The League named Joe Colombo its Man of the Year in May of that year, even though in March he had been slapped with a 2.5-year prison sentence for lying on his application for a real estate broker's license. The sentence was delayed pending appeal, and Colombo stepped up his efforts to promote the League. He even appeared on The Dick Cavett Show, a popular late-night television talk show, to discuss anti-Italian American discrimination. Some of the bosses of the other families were not pleased. This kind of deliberate self-exposure was unheard of for a mafia chief. Not even the egomaniacal John Gotti would have considered this kind of publicity during his reign as boss of the Gambino family in the late 80s and early 90s. By the time the second annual rally rolled around, Joe Colombo, the self-appointed civil rights leader, was walking on thin ice. As he made his way through the crowd on that summer day in 1971, he undoubtedly realized that he had ruffled some feathers. But apparently he didn't know how badly he'd ruffled them. The knives were already out. The list that changed everything. After the first Italian-American Civil Rights League rally in 1970, Joe Colombo was able to convince many of his fellow bosses and their capos to contribute to his cause. How else would he have gotten the docks to close down for the event? But on December 16, 1970, FBI agents arrested Colombo soldier Rocco Morale and searched the briefcase he was carrying. The special agents found a list of names or nicknames and dollar amounts. Colombo, who was with Morale when he was arrested, appeared before a federal grand jury and was questioned about the list. Rather than pleading the fifth the way a gangster normally would, Colombo, the civil rights leader, declared that these dollar amounts were contributions he'd raised for the League. Carl, he testified, was boss Carlo Gambino. Next to his name on the list was written $30,000. No doubt Gambino and all the other mobsters on that list wished Colombo hadn't been so forthcoming. The mob's initial support for Colombo's League soon dried up. The bosses felt that he had become too public, and in the mob that was never good for business. The gallows, the shooting, and the fall of Joe Colombo. Joe Colombo also faced serious opposition within his own family. The Gallo brothers, Larry, Albert, and the notorious Crazy Joey, had been chafing under the family's leadership for years and had already tried to take over the family in the early 60s. Joey Gallo had just been released from state prison in February 1971 after serving a 9-year stint, and his bitter feelings about the family leadership hadn't changed. Gallo and his brothers had long felt that they deserved a bigger piece of the pie for their efforts, and they'd proven in the past that they were ready, willing, and able to go to war to get what they wanted. The brothers also had a powerful ally in Genovese Capo Vincent Chin Gigante, who would one day become boss of his family. As Joe Colombo muscled his way through the crowd in Columbus Circle to get to the stage, 3 gunshots suddenly rang out. People ducked, yelled in panic, and ran for shelter. Police officers fought the stampede to get to the source of the trouble. They found Joe Colombo lying on the pavement, blood streaming from 3 head wounds. A black man holding a pistol stood over him. The police grabbed the man, but as they attempted to restrain him, a loyal Colombo retainer pulled a gun and put 3 bullets into the man's back, killing him on the spot. Police later learned that the man who shot Colombo was a street hustler named Jerome Johnson, who had somehow obtained press credentials from the League. Suspicion immediately fell on Joey Gallo, who had a reputation for doing deals with African-American criminals like Nicky Barnes. Gallo felt that the mob could only benefit from cooperating with black crime groups. But many mobsters didn't like his fraternizing with them. But police investigations and internal mob inquiries found no connection between Gallo and Jerome Johnson. Nor were they able to prove that the gunman had been hired by Carlo Gambino or any other mafia boss who had a bone to pick with Colombo. Johnson was apparently a crazed lone gunman. Colombo did not die of his wounds. He remained in a coma for the rest of his life. Or as Joey Gallo characteristically put it, he was vegetabled. The shooting of Joe Colombo was just one chapter in the violent, strife-filled history of the Colombo family, a saga that begins with one of the most despised mob bosses in the history of the American Mafia, Joe Profaci and the Gallo Revolt. Joe Profaci, the first and longest reigning boss of the Profaci family, was hated by his men. As soon as Joe Colombo took his place after his death, the family was almost immediately rechristened the Colombo family in an effort to erase the memory of his stingy, iron-handed tenure on the throne. Profaci's legitimate business, importing olive oil and tomato paste, earned him the nickname the Olive Oil King. But this business was only a small fraction of his empire. Profaci lived in a huge mansion on a 328-acre estate on Long Island, which boasted a hunting lodge and its own private airport. But while other bosses were often generous with their wealth, Profaci was a skinflint who taxed his men for the right to be in his family. On top of the usual percentage that a mob boss is entitled to, Profaci charged an additional tax on all criminal activities pursued by his men. Each family member also had to pay dues of $25 a month. Many of Profaci's wise guys complained behind his back that he was just another mean, tight-fisted mustache Pete. But Profaci saw himself as a traditionalist who lived by the code of the original Sicilian mafia. Profaci was a clever survivor who managed to steer clear of the upheaval of the Castellamarese War in 1931, keeping his family intact while the Young Turks led by Lucky Luciano were carving up the remains of Salvatore Maranzano's family. The Profaci family, which was based in Brooklyn and parts of Staten Island, pursued the usual mob enterprises, labor rackets, gambling, hijacking, loan sharking, and extortion, later adding heroin importation to its portfolio. Profaci maintained a close alliance with Bonanno family boss Joseph Bonanno, and together they were powerful enough to scare off the other encroaching New York families. Profaci ruled his family for 3 decades without a serious challenge to his leadership. But by the beginning of the 1960s, the bosses of the Gambino, Lucchese, and Genovese families were ready for a shift in the power alignment in New York. The Profaci-Bonanno alliance had become an 800-pound gorilla, frequently getting in their way. As mob expert Jerry Capetti points out, Carlo Gambino, who sought out allies among Profaci's men, fomented trouble from within. The Gallo brothers, Lawrence, Albert, and Joey, along with their crew from the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, had been dissatisfied with Profaci's leadership for some time. They scratched out a living with their rackets. But because Profaci always took a big chunk of their profits, They felt that they weren't getting ahead. They were particularly bitter about the Profaci-ordered execution of fellow crew member Frankie Schatz Abatimarco. Profaci felt that Frankie Schatz, a numbers banker, had become disloyal and disrespectful in withholding tribute to the boss. The gallows didn't dispute the charge, but felt that the punishment far outweighed the gravity of the crime. By February 1961, the Gallo crew had finally had enough. In a bold move, they kidnapped several prominent members of the family, including longtime underboss Joseph Magliocco and capo Joe Colombo. The gallows then sent word to Profaci that they wanted some changes made in the way profits were divvied up. Profaci sent his consigliere, Charles Sige Lo Cicero, to negotiate with them. After weeks of negotiations, the two sides came to an agreement, and the hostages were released. Everyone was apparently happy with the outcome. But 6 months later, Profaci retaliated. One of the hostages, soldier John Simone, lured Larry Gallo to a bar in Brooklyn, where two thugs threw a rope around his neck and started to choke him. They threatened to kill him if he didn't call his brothers and tell them to come to the bar. Larry Gallo knew he and his brothers would all be dead if he did that, so he refused to cooperate. The rope was pulled tighter, and Gallo would have been a goner if a policeman hadn't suddenly walked in. The front door of the bar had been left ajar, and because it was a Sunday and blue laws demanded that all commercial establishments close shop on Sundays, the cop came in to investigate. Simone and his thugs ran for the door. The cop's partner tried to stop them, but one of the hoods shot him in the face. They escaped in a waiting Cadillac. The gallows then learned that Profaci's men had killed their chief enforcer, Joseph Joe Jelly Gioielli, a few days earlier. The Gallo crew lashed out, taking potshots at Profaci loyalists wherever they found them. The police raided the Gallo crew's headquarters in Brooklyn, hoping to head off an all-out war within the family. The violence subsided, but the bitterness festered. Profaci's troubles weren't relegated to internal matters. In early 1962, Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese went before the Mafia Commission and proposed that Profaci retire as boss for the good of his family and the mob in general. Joe Bonanno vehemently objected to such a move, fearing that he'd lose his most important ally. The commission decided not to decide in this matter, and it became a moot point when Profaci succumbed to cancer on June 6, 1962. Profaci's underboss, Joseph Magliocco, was quickly installed as boss, which did not please Lucchese and Gambino. From all indications, Magliocco would faithfully carry on with Profaci's policies, including the close alliance with Joe Bonanno. For that reason, the old boss's enemies automatically became the new boss's enemies. Joe Magliocco must have had days when he regretted taking over as boss of the Profaci family. The Gallo crew still wasn't happy, and they came at him with a vengeance, determined to bring him down. Hoping to weaken Magliocco's hold on the family, they targeted his strongest men, particularly the fierce Carmine Jr. Persico. Persico's car was bombed in 1963, but he escaped with only minor injuries. On May 19th of that year, he was shot in the face, hand and shoulder in a drive-by shooting orchestrated by the gallows. Persico was reportedly so tough that he spat out one of the bullets that entered his face. In another incident, Persico's chief enforcer, Hugh McIntosh, a giant of a man who wore a size 52 suit, was ambushed and shot, but managed to survive. But the Gallo Revolt came to an abrupt halt in the fall of 1963, when 2 key crew members were murdered, and 17 others were indicted on a variety of racketeering charges. With Joey Gallo already almost 2 years into a lengthy prison sentence, the Gallo crew just didn't have the manpower to keep the fight going. Magliocco may have been relieved to have the pesky Gallo crew off his back, but his real troubles were just beginning. Magliocco, Bonanno, and the failed conspiracy. He had inherited Joe Profaci's alliance with the Bonanno family, but he was an indecisive leader, and unfortunately for him, took his cues from the ambitious Joe Bonanno. Before Profaci died, he and Bonanno had been plotting the assassination of their chief nemeses, bosses Carlo Gambino, Tommy Lucchese, and Stefano Magaddino of the Buffalo family, who also happened to be Bonanno's cousin. Bonanno's goal was to get rid of his enemies and install himself as capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses and head of the commission. Following Profaci's wishes, Magliocco went along with the plot. Bonanno gave Magliocco the task of having Gambino and Lucchese whacked, and Magliocco passed the contract on to one of his most loyal hitmen, Joe Colombo. Magliocco was confident that Colombo would get the job done. But Colombo had a mind of his own, and he could see which way the wind was blowing. After assessing the situation, he decided that Bonanno was too power-hungry, and his attempt to take over the commission would ultimately fail, leaving the Profaci family holding the bag. So instead of carrying out the executions, Colombo informed Lucchese and Gambino of the conspiracy. They in turn went to the commission and demanded justice. The commission did not want to see another Castellamarese war, so they exercised their regulatory powers and summoned Magliocco and Bonanno to appear before them. Bonanno defied the order and went into hiding. Magliocco obeyed the order and admitted his part in the conspiracy. The commission took pity on him, knowing that the devious Bonanno had to have been the driving force behind the plot. Magliocco was fined $50,000 and forced to retire. They spared his life, but Magliocco had a heart attack and died a few months later. At the suggestion of Carlo Gambino, Joe Colombo was rewarded for his part in thwarting the conspiracy and made the new boss of the Profaci family. Gambino would come to regret that endorsement when Colombo and his love of publicity threw an unwanted spotlight on the organized crime underworld. As a young man, Joe Colombo made his mark as part of Joe Profaci's elite execution squad, a 5-man hit team that included Larry and Joey Gallo. When you killed with the Gallo boys, Carl Sifakis writes in the Mafia Encyclopedia, you killed with the best. In addition to his hitman duties, Colombo initially worked as an enforcer on the docks, then moved up to running gambling dens, hijacking, and loan sharking. But perhaps what formed his thinking more than any of his criminal experiences was the gangland slaying of his father, Anthony Colombo, who was found garroted in his car along with his girlfriend. Joe Colombo knew firsthand how quickly a wise guy can fall out of favor and be exterminated. Colombo was probably thinking of his father's fate when he decided that siding with Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese was a better bet than following his own boss, Joe Magliocco, and the power-mad Joe Bonanno. In January 1964, at age 41, Colombo became one of the youngest men ever to take over a mob family. Many within the mafia welcomed the regime change, but some had their doubts about Colombo's competence. New Jersey boss Sam the Plumber de Cavalcante complained in a conversation taped by the FBI. What does he know? Oof. Imagine becoming boss of an entire New York crime family and immediately getting reviewed like a guy who just got promoted to assistant manager at Home Depot. But as Colombo settled into his position, some felt that he was the most progressive mob leader to come down the pike in some years. Others felt he was a self-centered showboat who sported excessively expensive suits and enjoyed being covered by the press. When he formed the Italian-American Civil Rights League, his fellow mobsters didn't know what to think. On one hand, they agreed with his cause, believing that all Italian-Americans were unfairly targeted by law enforcement simply because of their heritage. But on the other hand, they traditionally thrived in the shadows away from public scrutiny. Colombo, they felt, was drawing too much attention to them. After an initial showing of support, mobsters tried to distance themselves from him, especially after the FBI discovered the damning list of mob donors. The attempt on his life at the League rally in 1971 was too public to have been a mafia hit, despite the finger pointing by the police. It just wasn't the way the mob did things. They would have chosen an isolated spot late at night and away from witnesses, not unlike the way his father was killed. Nevertheless, Colombo's incapacitation was not an unwelcome event to those who felt he had stepped dangerously out of bounds. Colombo survived the shooting, but just barely. Brain dead and unresponsive, he lived 7 more years, finally dying in 1978. During that time, the Colombo family closed ranks and chose not to reveal the identity of their new boss. The FBI worked for 3 years to find out who he was. Finally, they discovered that the new boss was Thomas DeBella, a wise guy who hardly registered on their radar screens. With only one conviction for bootlegging in 1932, they had no idea how important DeBella was in the family hierarchy. Keeping things quiet was a good idea, but no sooner did one mob star get vegetabled than another one found the spotlight. And this one threatened to shine brighter than even Joe Colombo. Crazy Joey Gallo. The Colombo family's attempts to keep a low profile were threatened by the release of Crazy Joey Gallo from prison in 1971. The Crazy nickname was misleading. Mob traditionalists called him crazy because his ideas were so progressive. He saw the future of organized crime, and it went far beyond the Little Italy social clubs and Brooklyn hangouts of the Italian-American gangsters. There was money to be made in Harlem and other black neighborhoods, and he wanted the mob to be in on it. Gallo advocated forming partnerships with black gangsters, reasoning that they would give the mafia inroads into rackets they otherwise couldn't touch. Which, if we're being honest here, made Joey Gallo look less like a traditional mobster and more like a criminal venture capitalist with anger issues. Gallo had gained some culture during his stint at New York State's Green Haven prison. He devoured books and newspapers and took up painting. He spoke authoritatively about the great artists he'd studied. Shortly after he returned from prison, a movie based on Jimmy Breslin's novel, The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, was released. The novel and film were a comic take on Gallo's Brooklyn crew. The fictional gang kept a lion in their basement to scare tardy payments out of loan sharking customers. The Gallo crew actually did keep a pet lion that they routinely introduced to their habitual deadbeats. Because apparently somebody in Brooklyn looked at organized crime and thought, you know what this operation needs? A jungle predator. Joey Gallo didn't find the movie very funny. The actor who played Kid Sally was Jerry Orbach, who would later play Detective Lenny Briscoe on the long-running Law & Order television series. Gallo wanted to set Orbach straight on how real mobsters lived, so he invited the actor and his wife to dinner. Orbach accepted the invitation and was so impressed with Gallo's knowledge of books and art that they eventually became friends. Orbach introduced Gallo to several of his show business friends. Soon, Gallo was seen around town hobnobbing with celebrities. He even moved from Brooklyn to Greenwich Village to be closer to his new crowd. This was the exact kind of thing old-school mobsters hated. To them, gangsters weren't supposed to become celebrities. They were supposed to scare celebrities. On April 7th, 1972, Gallo was celebrating his birthday at the Copacabana nightclub with a group of friends that included Orbach, comedian David Steinberg, and columnist Earl Wilson. The party finally disbanded in the wee hours, and Gallo, his bodyguard, and 4 women went to Little Italy in downtown Manhattan. They found their way to Umberto's Clam House on Mulberry Street. Gallo and his bodyguard, Pete the Greek Diapolos made the mistake of sitting with their backs to the door, figuring they were safe on mafia holy ground. But a gunman with a .38 walked in and started shooting. Women screamed. Patrons hit the floor. Gallo assumed that he was the intended target, so he got up from the table and ran for the door, drawing fire away from the innocent. The killer trained his gun on Gallo and kept shooting. Gallo made it outside to the sidewalk, where he collapsed and died next to his Cadillac. Like Joe Colombo. Joey Gallo learned the hard way that the mob has no use for the limelight. And the irony is brutal. Joe Colombo became too public and ended up in a coma. Joey Gallo became too public and ended up bleeding out on a Manhattan sidewalk. The mob loved money. The mob loved power. But attention? Attention got people killed. The Colombo War. The Colombo family fell into chaos when the aging and ailing Thomas DeBella voluntarily stepped down as boss. His logical successor was the family's most powerful capo, Carmine Jr. Persico. But Persico had faced a relentless onslaught of prosecutions that sent him to prison for 10 of the 13 years prior to 1985. Still, he managed to maintain his position as boss while incarcerated, empowering his brother Alphonse and Gennaro Jerry Langella to carry out his orders. During this period, the family concentrated their efforts on narcotics and labor racketeering. But as the government stepped up its campaign to stamp out organized crime in America, both Persico and Langella faced charges in the Mafia Commission case, where the government used the RICO statutes to bring down the heads of the New York families. Persico, who chose to represent himself in that trial, was outraged that the government could try him just for being a member of La Cosa Nostra. He showed his frustration in court by shouting out, "Without the mafia, there would be no case here," which is maybe not the strongest legal strategy ever attempted in federal court. That's like robbing a bank and yelling, "Without the robbery, there wouldn't even be a trial." In the end, Persico and Langella were both convicted and sentenced to 100 years each. Persico knew he would never see freedom again, but he had no intention of giving up the reins. He had ruled the family from prison before, and he would do it again, at least until his son, Alphonse "Alley Boy" Persico, finished the prison term he was serving so that he could take over for his father. Carmine Persico appointed a distant cousin, Victor "Little Vic" Orena, as his acting boss. In the meantime, Orena came to like wearing the crown. With the backing of Gambino family usurper John Gotti, Orena lobbied the commission in 1990 to have Persico ousted and himself recognized as the rightful boss. Colombo family members soon took sides. Tensions mounted. Persico loyalists struck first. On June 20th, 1991, a five-man hit team led by Persico's consigliere, Carmine Sessa, converged on Orena's home on Long Island, ready to take him out. But one of the shooters jumped the gun, firing his weapon before the other men were in position. Orena saw them coming and managed to escape. That failed hit basically guaranteed there was no going back. At that point, the Colombo family wasn't a crime family anymore. It was a civil war with union connections. This attempt on his life forced him to reach out to the other families for help. He renewed his petition to the commission to dethrone Persico and legitimize his position as undisputed boss. Sessa appealed to the commission on behalf of Persico, portraying Orena as an upstart who was betraying his boss. The commission was unable to broker a lasting peace for the Colombo family, and all hell broke loose on November 18th. When two carloads of Orena supporters ambushed Persico capo Greg Scarpa, Sr. in Brooklyn, as he drove his daughter and granddaughter home. Hitmen ran from their vehicles with guns drawn and converged on Scarpa's car. But Scarpa, one of the toughest gangsters the mob has ever seen, hit the accelerator and made a run for it, crashing into anything that got in his way. Fenders crunched and bullets flew. A few bystanders were injured, but Scarpa and his loved ones escaped unharmed. After the incident, Scarpa, who had been diagnosed with AIDS in 1986 after receiving a tainted blood transfusion from a member of his crew, entered the fray like a wild man. He had nothing to lose. Interestingly, Scarpa had been a secret informer for the FBI for 30 years, playing both sides of the fence to his own advantage. Because of course he was. This family had everything: assassination attempts, informants, prison bosses, internal wars, celebrity gangsters, and enough betrayal to make Shakespeare throw his notebook into the Hudson River. As for Scarpa's legendary toughness, he matched Carmine Persico, who had once spat out a bullet fired into his face. In 1992, Scarpa took a bullet in the eye during a shootout. Scarpa drove himself home, poured himself a scotch, and called the police. He lost the eye. 5 days after their attempt on Scarpa's life, Arena supporters came back hard, gunning down Henry "Hank the Bank" Smurra outside a donut shop in Brooklyn. This hit team was led by William "Wild Bill" Cutolo. War broke out. 12 men died in all. Cutolo threw himself into it, as did Scarpa for the Persico camp. 2 of the victims were innocent bystanders. 15 other people were seriously wounded. Authorities cracked down on both sides to end the violence, which had gotten far out of hand. 41 Persico loyalists were sent to prison, as well as Arena and his most powerful capo, Pasquale Amato. The last casualty in the Colombo War, Arena capo John Scopo, was the handiwork of an 18-year-old assassin named John Papa, who had been dispatched by Greg Scarpa. Papa, who wore a large tattoo of 2 menacing eyes across his upper back, under the inscription "Mort prima del disonore," death before dishonor, then gunned down his 2 partners in the Scopo murder for taking undeserved credit for the hit. Eventually, Papa was convicted on 4 murder charges. He is now serving 4 life sentences. The Persico faction ultimately claimed victory. But the war had weakened the family as a whole. Some would have thought it was time to call for a truce and regroup. But Carmine Persico wasn't through yet. Carmine Persico rules from prison. Carmine Persico continued to pull strings in the hope of getting his son Alphonse on the throne. The college-educated alley boy Persico was scheduled to be released from prison in May 1993, after which he would have taken over as boss. But the government had other ideas. They charged him with crimes relating to his participation in the Colombo War, hoping to keep him locked up. But in August 1994, he was found not guilty. Perhaps not wanting to risk a parole violation for consorting with known criminals, Alphonse Persico lay low while one of his father's cousins, Andrew Russo, took over as acting boss in 1996. 3 years later, Russo was tried and convicted on racketeering and jury tampering charges. At this point, becoming acting boss of the Colombo family had roughly the same career stability as being the drummer in Spinal Tap. Alphonse took his place as acting boss, but within a few months, he was arrested by the Coast Guard off the Florida Keys for gun possession. A search of his speedboat, the Looking Good, yielded a loaded pistol and shotgun. Nothing says keeping a low profile quite like getting arrested on a speedboat named Looking Good with enough firearms on board to concern the Coast Guard. In 2000, He was tried on the gun charges and sentenced to 18 months in prison. On the day of his scheduled release, January 24th, 2001, Alphonse Persico was indicted for loan sharking and held without bail as a suspect in the murder of William Wild Bill Cutolo, a staunch Orina supporter during the war. Cutolo had been appointed underboss by Persico as a peace gesture in 1999, but then suddenly disappeared on his way to a meeting with the boss. And in organized crime, disappeared on the way to a meeting is basically mafia code for, yeah, he's never coming back. Within a week of his detainment on the new charges, Alphonse Persico and 10 other key Colombo members were slapped with federal indictments. Alphonse Persico threw in the towel on December 20th, 2001, pleading guilty to loan sharking, money laundering, and racketeering charges. A plea bargain deal called for him to pay the government $1 million and serve 13 years in prison. In January 2005, New York Magazine cited Carmine Jr. Persico as the boss of the Colombo family, with John Jackie D. DeRoss as his underboss, Joel Joe Waverly Kakashi as his consigliere, and Thomas Tommy Shots Gioeli as his street boss. According to the magazine, Gioeli had been able to bridge the gap that existed between mobsters who were shooting at each other, which honestly deserves some kind of humanitarian award by Colombo family standards. But given their history, one has to wonder if the wounds of the Colombo War will ever heal. On October 14, 2004, Persico was finally indicted in New York for the Cutolo murder. However, on November 3, 2006, the judge declared a mistrial due to allegations that Cutolo's wife, Marguerite, had lied under oath. In the second trial, on December 28, 2007, Persico and underling John Jackie D. DeRoss were convicted of murder in aid of racketeering and witness tampering. On February 27, 2009, Persico was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the Cutolo murder. He served 32 years in federal prison, from 1987 until his death on March 7, 2019, at the age of 83. And somehow, after all the wars, betrayals, shootings, indictments, conspiracies, prison sentences, and internal bloodshed, the Colombo family still existed. Damaged, weakened, watched constantly by federal law enforcement, but still standing. Barely. The story of the Colombo family isn't just the story of organized crime. It's the story of what happens when ego collides with secrecy. For decades, the American mafia survived because it understood one simple rule: stay invisible. Joe Profaci ruled through fear and greed. Joe Colombo chased publicity and became a national figure. Crazy Joey Gallo tried dragging the mob into a new era. Carmine Persico ruled from a prison cell like some kind of incarcerated emperor refusing to surrender the throne. And every single phase of that evolution left bodies behind. The Colombos fought the government. They fought rival families. They fought the media. Eventually, they fought themselves harder than anybody else ever could. That's what makes this family different from the others. The Gambinos became famous because of John Gotti. The Genoveses became powerful because they stayed hidden. But the Colombos became legendary because chaos followed them everywhere. Bosses got shot in public. Capos disappeared forever. Informants manipulated both sides. Civil war erupted in the streets of Brooklyn, while innocent bystanders got caught in the crossfire. At times, the Colombo family looked less like a criminal organization and more like a collapsing empire trying to duct tape itself together with paranoia and bullets. And maybe the strangest part of all this is that they survived any of it. Because by every logical standard, The Colombo family should have destroyed itself decades ago. But organized crime survives the same way old cities survive, through fear. Adaptation. Silence. And people willing to step into power no matter how dangerous the throne becomes. The names change. The faces change. The funerals keep happening. But the machine keeps moving. And somewhere in the middle of all of it sits the ghost of Joe Colombo himself. The mob boss who stepped into the spotlight believing he could control the attention. Instead, the attention consumed him, like it consumed so many others after him. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to subscribe to the Pizzaverse for more deep dives into organized crime history, forgotten mob wars, mafia politics, federal investigations, old New York underworld stories, and the criminals who thought they were untouchable. From the Commission to Brooklyn Street crews, to prison bosses running families from behind bars. We don't rewrite history. We excavate it. Pizzaverse Studios. A Palermo Productions original. Thank you for watching. The support. The comments. The shares. And the continued love for these documentaries genuinely mean everything. These stories take time, research, editing, and a deep respect for the history behind them. And none of it would be possible without the people who continue supporting the channel. I appreciate every single one of you. See you in the next one. Joe Colombo. Joe Colombo, the mob boss who looked at centuries of mafia tradition built around secrecy and said, "Yeah, but what if I went on television instead?" Founded the Italian-American Civil Rights League, fought with the FBI publicly, appeared on talk shows, and somehow convinced thousands of regular Italian-Americans to rally behind him, while half the mafia quietly developed stress-induced migraines in the background. Ultimately proved that becoming a celebrity while running a crime family is generally not considered a long-term business strategy. Joe Profaci. Joe Profaci, known as the Olive Oil King, also known by his men as that cheap prick charging us dues again. Ruled through fear, greed, and enough extra taxes to make the IRS look emotionally supportive. Built one of the most profitable families in New York, while simultaneously making everybody underneath him miserable enough to eventually start a civil war. Joe Gallo. Crazy Joey Gallo. Not actually crazy. Just a violent mobster intellectual who liked art, literature, celebrities, progressive criminal networking, and apparently keeping a lion around for debt collection purposes. Old-school mobsters hated him because he behaved less like a traditional gangster and more like somebody trying to turn organized crime into a Manhattan cultural movement. Ended up proving one timeless mob rule: the spotlight always comes with bullets attached. Carmine Persico. Carmine the Snake Persico. Spent so much time running the Colombo family from prison that federal authorities probably should have just given him office space and a receptionist. Survived shootings, racketeering cases, the Mafia Commission trial, internal wars, and multiple assassination attempts while refusing to surrender control of the family for decades. Basically ruled the Colombos like a medieval king trapped inside a concrete dungeon, yelling orders through lawyers and visitors.
It's 1:37 in the morning. You're emotionally exhausted. The internet's melting down. Your ex posted another cryptic quote. And some guy named Randy from Arkansas just typed, "First LOL" in a live stream chat. You need comfort. You need atmosphere. You need Harlow Blonde's Motel 6 confessions. The first late-night internet experience scientifically engineered to make you feel like you're smoking cigarettes outside a Nevada casino, avoiding 3 warrants, and discussing failed relationships with a lounge singer named Crystal. All from your phone. Included features: old Hollywood filter technology. Every live stream automatically feels 17% more dramatic, 6% more glamorous, and 92% more emotionally unstable. Hot talk mode transforms ordinary internet conversations into, "Well, sweetheart, let me tell you what really happened in Reno." Digital lounge atmosphere. Side effects may include nostalgia, emotional oversharing, mysterious attraction to neon signs, and calling strangers baby after 11 p.m. But wait, order now and receive a free parasocial attachment. That's right. Within minutes, you'll begin feeling like Harlow knows you personally. The replay gang is family. And the live stream comment section is your emotional support group. No therapy required. Also included, Memoirs of Motel 6 Story Pack, featuring suspicious truck stop philosophy, emotionally damaged storytelling, mysterious blonde wisdom, and at least one sentence that starts with, "I probably shouldn't tell this story, but..." Warning. Motel 6 confessions may cause staying awake until 4 a.m., emotional dependency on live streams, sudden interest in Vegas aesthetics, dramatic cigarette lighting for no reason, and telling coworkers, "You wouldn't understand the replay gang." Do not combine with boxed wine, unresolved trauma, or YouTube comment sections after midnight. The modern world took away the social club. So we made a digital one with lipstick, neon signs, and emotional damage. Harlow Blonde's Motel 6 confessions. Because therapy is expensive, but live streams are free.
And I go into background. I won't go quietly. I'm bringing my crown. When I go into that ground, oh, they gotta bury me face down. From the rubble, what do I see? There's a whole damn army thinking that they're gonna harm me, saying that I'll never get free. Oh, I got troubles, they won't let me be. But I won't get tired, set the town on fire till my troubles got trouble with me. Thinking that they've won, it's only just begun. When I go into that ground, I won't go quietly. I'm bringing my crown. And when I go into that ground, oh, they gotta bury me face down. since I was a boy. But now I'm done running, got another thing coming. Watch my enemies get destroyed. Oh, I got troubles of more than one kind, but I never sleep, gotta bury me 6 feet deep where the sun don't shine. Thinking that they've won, it's only just begun.